Right, hopefully it's still available in the table office for those members who wish to see the report. The thing is, the Home Secretary quite rightly took longer than expected, and I've no problem in that. Just to say to the leader of the opposition, Cameron, the same is available as well, and to Lib Dem Cameron Beddoe. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Lady for advance sight of this statement, although I must say I couldn't believe my ears listening to the Home Secretary statement, as if this was their plan all along, when we all know it is another U-turn after months of pressure. The Prime Minister has finally accepted our calls for a full statutory national inquiry into the grooming gangs, and I welcome that we have finally reached this point. And we must remember that this is not a victory for politicians, especially the ones like the Home Secretary who had to be dragged to this position, or the Prime Minister. This is a victory for the survivors who have been calling for this for years. I have been speaking to many who do not have confidence that a government that ignored their concerns will deliver. But before I turn to the detail of the Home Secretary's statement, I want to recognize the tireless work of those who refused to let this issue be buried. Survivors like Fiona Goddard, who bravely waived her anonymity, and the parents of survivors like Marlon West, who I spoke to this morning, Maggie Oliver, whose courage in speaking truth to power has been instrumental in bringing us to this point, the late Andrew Norfolk, whose fearless journalism brought these crimes to light, Baroness Casey for her review, and Charlie Peters, who has consistently been a voice for the voiceless. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's handling of this scandal is an extraordinary failure of leadership. His judgment has once again been found wanting. Since he became Prime Minister, he and the Home Secretary dismissed calls for an inquiry because they did not want to cause a stir. They accused those of us demanding justice for the victims of this scandal as, and I quote, jumping on a far-right bandwagon, a claim the Prime Minister's official spokesman restated this weekend. Shameful. It has been left to Conservatives time and time again to force this issue 3 times, Mr. Speaker, 3 times. They can mutter now, they all mutter now 3 times. Mr. Speaker, these Labour MPs voted against the national inquiry, voted against it 3 times. Liberal Democrats didn't bother to vote didn't bother to vote at all. Asleep at the wheel. Labour MPs voted against a reasoned amendment to the Children's Bill at committee stage of that bill. They voted against at committee stage of the crime and policing. Oh, Mr. Swallow, I want you to set a good example. It's a very serious debate. Temps are running high, but I certainly don't want you to see you pointing and shouting and brawling in that way. So bad, Mr. Speaker. They point and shout as much as they like. They know the truth, as we on the side of the House 3 times. I will repeat myself, Mr. Speaker, 3 times. Labour event. Our MPs voted against a reason amendment to the Children's Bill at committee stage of that bill. They voted against at committee stage of the Crime and Policing Bill. They voted against a national inquiry, and at Prime Minister's questions the Prime Minister repeatedly ruled out a national inquiry, to the cheers of all of these Labour MPs who are now pretending this is what they believed all along. And no doubt the Home Secretary in her response to me will try and claim that the previous government did nothing. Yes, a wholly false assertion that she should not repeat today. The Conservative government took extensive action, starting with the original J report commissioned in 2014 by the then Home Secretary Theresa May. A year later she commissioned the independent investigation into child sexual abuse, and Sajid Javid commissioned ethnicity data collection in 2018. So it's wrong, as the Home Secretary said, to claim that ethnicity data collection had not been done, and I will remind her that the Foreign Secretary criticized Sajid Javid at the time, said he was bringing the office of Home Secretary into disrepute, and said he was pandering to the far right for doing exactly what she says she's doing now. They should be ashamed of themselves. We accepted all the recommendations of that previous child sexual in by 2022, except the one to have a new cabinet minister, which would not have made any difference at all to the victims of this scandal. The Home Secretary claimed that the recommendations sat on the shelf. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, we went further than those recommendations. It was the Conservatives who established the Grooming Gangs Task Force, which supported police forces to make 807 arrests for group-based child sexual exploitation last year. So don't tell me we did nothing. It is vital, Mr. Speaker, that this inquiry is robust, swift, and above all independent. There are legitimate concerns about institutions investigating themselves, especially as some of the most egregious cases of institutional failure occurred in Labour-controlled authorities. They can moan as much as they like, Mr. Speaker, but the people out there believe that is why nothing has happened yet. In Greater Manchester, Operation Augusta was prematurely shut down in Rotherham under continuous Labour control since 1974. We saw repeated failures in Telford, where Labour has predominantly held power. The current MP initially rejected calls for an inquiry while serving as council leader. This inquiry must have teeth. It must start with known hotspots like Bradford and Rochdale, and I commend my honourable friend, the member for Keighley, for his persistent advocacy of this issue. We need clear commitments, Mr. Speaker. For example, will the inquiry examine the role of ethnicity in these crimes, confronting hard truths about potential cover? UPS, motivated by fears of appearing racist, there's no point then muttering. The Home Secretary said it herself. I spoke to the father of a survivor. Just this morning, and he told me the survivors need to have someone who is independent, that they can go to and trust. It is no use them being forced to speak to the same authorities who ignored them in the first place. So will this inquiry ensure that no one, whether police officers, councillors or council officials, is beyond scrutiny? The government's approach to the Casey review itself raises serious concerns. While the review's findings are crucial, we as legislators are sent here to make decisions, not to outsource the difficult ones. The Prime Minister has waited months for someone to take this decision for him. This is kind of dithering and delay that the survivors complained about. Mr. Speaker, we need answers to the following questions. The House deserves to know what changed the Prime Minister's mind. From thinking this was dog whistle far-right politics to something he must do. When exactly did Baroness Casey submit her findings to Downing Street, and did the government request any changes to her report? Does she agree that anyone in authority who deliberately covered up these disgusting crimes should be prosecuted for misconduct in public office, and those prosecutions should happen alongside, not after, the inquiry? Because we believe that anyone in the police, local authorities, social services or even the CPS who covered this up because they cared more about so-called community relations than about protecting vulnerable girls as young as 10 years old should be pursued. And we welcome her comments about perpetrators not being able to make asylum claims. I will remind the Home Secretary that we put forward an amendment in the Borders Bill